Today we are going to discuss the formal and informal communication. Formal communication is the communication that flows along the lines of management or authority, or it is the kind of communication that is done when you are communicating, uh, like in jobs or in places where it's maybe, for example, you're writing an application. This is formal communication. As a student, formal communication is when you are formally communicating with or when you are communicating with your with vice chancellor or with higher management through means or through medium or through channels like email um, uh, or application or like a letter. So like formal communication is that kind of communication. It is normally done with the authorities or the management or uh, the people who are in hierarchy. uh, Formal communication takes the shape of manual forms or reports or meetings. So, at the level of jobs, it is mostly associated with meetings and reports and all that. But when it comes to students' formal communication is the communication that they do with like for example, you send queries. So those queries that you're sending are proper way of asking questions. So it is formal way of communicating with the teacher, or when you're writing an email to a teacher, or when you're writing an application to vice chancellor, or when you're writing application to someone else, or email to someone else who's of the authority, let's suppose head of the department. So these are the formal communications that occur when, these are the mediums or the shapes in which, or the channels through which formal communication occurs. Informal communication is normally which is occurring when people are randomly talking to one another, uh, and the topic of conversation is not very serious. So maybe you're having some kind of gossip, or maybe you're discussing even if you're discussing some work conditions, still it's more associated with gossip rather than formal topics. And informal communication is occurs when you people are communicating with your friends, or when you're communicating with your class fellows, or maybe with co-workers in workplace. And in that stance, we can say that informal communication is more like rumors and gossips, and the medium or the channel through which it is communicated is mostly like face-to-face communication or telephonic conversation. These are normally considered as informal mediums of communication. Okay, so the difference between formal and informal communication is that formal communication is used in a professional setting. For example, if you're filling a form, it is a formal communication. For example, if you are writing an application, it's a formal communication. So it is mostly for the purpose is actually the professional purpose, or the setting is the setting is the professional setting. Setting means where you are in, like in places where there are organizations, whereas informal communication on the other hand are used with friends and families as compared to professional settings. So when you are sitting with your family and when you're sitting with your friends, those settings are normally where you speak or use informal communications. Informal communication, you don't use slangs at all. So not just slangs, but you cannot use even idioms in informal communication. Your communication should be um, very academic when it comes to formal. So informal communication, there should be no slang. There is no short forms of the words. Nothing like that is used in formal communication. Whereas in informal communication, it contains shortened version of the words, where like you can use don't, don, and t, uh, um, apostrophe t, don't. And so you can use the short form of the verb, but in a formal you cannot use the short forms of the words. You cannot use those message languages that you use, or the verbal language that you use. There should be a proper sentence structure that you should write, and words like informal communication, words like therefore, words like these conjunctive adverbials should be there. Conjunctive adverbials, for example, additionally, moreover, therefore, hence, all these words should be, used in formal communication. So that it's proper way of writing, uh, of communicating formally and informally. And then informal communication, we normally pronounce words correctly, whereas in informal communication, because it's like slang words, you can say anything that you want. Whereas in formal communication, it's not allowed. There are certain ways of formal communication. Formal communication is divided into three parts. The um, the the first one is downward communication. Downward communication is where information moves from the higher management to the employees. That is where the communication is first with the higher authority, and it is communicated to the employees. It can be, for example, from the university management to the students, or university management to the teachers. For example, there is a notification of, let's suppose, notification of holidays, Eid holidays, or that we are going to start summer semester. So this notification moves through downward communication. So from the higher authority, it goes to the employees, to us, and then from us it goes to you people. So that's how you are communicating. Or for example, the higher authority communicates directly to you through messages that summer classes are going to be started or initiated. So this is how the downward communication is done. An easy example for that could be like this of if there is some holidays that they are announcing. So uh, it goes from higher authority to the lower management. So it's the downward communication. Upward communication is where the information moves from the employees to the higher management, and it can be, for example, from a student to the higher authority. So for example, if you're writing an application, it is the information that you're sending from the it is sent from from the students to the higher authority, which is actually the upward movement, right? It can be from the teachers to the higher authority, maybe because there is some problem with the software, maybe there's some problem that students are facing, so the students or teachers, they communicate it to the higher authority through application, through written communication. This is upward communication. Horizontal communication is where the information is shared between peers. That is, for example, horizontal communication is on each level. So higher authorities, they communicate with one another. This is horizontal communication. We all teachers communicate with one another. This is horizontal communication. All the students communicate with one another. This is also horizontal communication. So it is done through the peers or contemporary, that is, or people on the same level. It's not the communication between the higher and the lower management, or between the higher and the or between the lower management and the higher management, but it is the communication which is done uh, among the higher management, or among the lower management, or among the middle management, whichever management is involved in that, or whichever group is involved in that, whether it is students, whether they are teachers, whether they are any place. Even in hospitals, if you see, there is higher management registrars, all the registrars of the wards, they communicate with one another. And then there is this another where all the TMOs communicate with one another. Then there is another hierarchy where it comes that all the house officers are communicating with one another, and that's how it goes, or all the patients are communicating with one another. So this is horizontal communication. Whereas when it comes to informal communication, we have only one type, and that is grapevine communication. And grapevine communication is informal chat, which is done from person to person, and it can be among the peers, it can be among two different groups, it can be among multiple groups altogether as well. It is informal communication. So for example, where a TMO, a house officer, and a patient are sitting, they are communicating through informal communication. Or for example, teacher and a student is communicating. This is just communication from the teacher to the student, which is an informal communication. But informal communication, as I discussed before as well, that it is the communication that is done from face to that is done through face to face communication, which does not involve written communication, which does not involve writing forms, which does not involve writing applications. But when it comes to formal communication, then informal communication, the people involved in the communication must use formal means of communication, which are the formal mediums of communication. That is, for example, email, or for example, um, uh, uh, application or letter. These are the formal means of communication. Okay. We'll discuss certain other features which are present both in formal and informal. Both are spontaneously born. That is, informal communication is spontaneously done, and there is no involvement of organizational charts or organization rules, or for example university rules or hospital rules, uh, or school rules. No written rules and regulations or procedures are there when it comes to when it comes to informal communication. And it is universal in nature. Why universal in nature? Because everyone around us know how to communicate in informal communication. Like informal communication is universal. It's happening everywhere around us. You don't need to train for learning formal communication, but you train for formal communication when it comes to writing applications or emails. You are trained in universities, you're right from the school, you are trained for that. It's relatively unstable because you there are differences which is coming in that. So at one point when I'm talking to my brother, it's completely different from the way I communicate to my friend, but both communications are informal communications. And this is how it goes when I communicate to my sister, is different. So, and when I communicate to my colleagues, it's different. It's relatively unstable, it does not stay the same, but it's still informal communication. Emphasis emphasizes people and relations. So all the instability comes from the relationship that you have with people. So if you're very close to them, then your communication will be extremely informal. If you are not close to them, then your communication will be um, little formal, not completely informal. So that's how it goes, because obviously now president or vice chancellor of a university are not close to us. So therefore when we are communicating with them, we always communicate through the formal means. So relationships and people involved in those communications matter when you are communicating with someone. Okay. Formal communication is for the um, official purposes, and informal communication is mostly for non-official purposes or for personal relationships. That is everyday communication. It is it would tell you clearly about the relationship between the people, that like what is the relationship because of which it is determined that which kind of communication will happen, as I've already given you the example of president, so or vice chancellor. So you know that vice chancellor and president, they are higher in authority, and we cannot be very informal with them, so therefore we directly go for the formal communication. And it in informal communication, it develops outside the formal organization without any defined behavior patterns and set relationships. So informal so far like uh, informal relationship develops outside the formal organization. For example, it can be between two friends, it can be between parents, um, uh, it can be between, siblings, just like that. It emphasizes the positions in terms of authority and function. So whenever we have formal organizations, in formal organizations we normally have authority and function involved. So whatever position is assigned, it has some kind of authority and function involved. Whereas in informal, the emphasis on people and their relationship. It's like uh, it's like when you're comparing, a formal organization is university, and an informal organization is, let's suppose, your home. So it's like emphasis is on people and their relationship, and there's nothing about the positions that they are assigned, and someone is higher in authority, and it's nothing like that. They are not formally assigned any authority. It follows the official chain of command, since it is based on a delegated authority, as I've just discussed. That it in formal organizations, you don't give direct orders. Sorry, you don't give authority to someone, that this is the first in authority, this is the second in authority, this is the third in authority. It's nothing like that. It just happens naturally, as the chain of command in informal communication is earned, right, among the group members. So it is not like the formal organization, where you are emphasizing on the delegated authority. So when the official chain goes, we know that there is a higher authority like vice chancellor or president, and then after that we have deans, and then after that we have head of the departments, and then we have assistant, with among them we have assistant professors, associate professors, assistant professors, and then we have lecturers, and then junior lecturers, and it goes on like that. So we have this kind of authority which is distributed, and uh, informal authority is to uh, is attaches to the uh, attaches to a, an uncontrolled environment, I can say. Whereas in formal authority, it is not uncontrolled, it is controlled authority. So formal authority is like properly controlled, whereas in informal organizations, it is not controlled. So these are the differences between the both. I hope it is clear now.